Confessional. I'm your host, Sandy Lowry, and today on the podcast, I am super excited to have our guest, Dr. Catherine Barrett. Dr. Catherine Barrett is a Melbourne-based doctor, researcher, educator, but she is also the founder of the phenomenal movement, the Kindness Pandemic. The Kindness Pandemic started 2 weeks ago and already has close to 600,000 followers. It was born around the idea that doing random acts of kindness or doing small acts of kindness towards neighbours, for people in our community, family, friends, actually would bring us some sort of comfort and happiness in these really unprecedented times of COVID-19. I can guarantee you'll absolutely love it. If you're not following them already, you can follow them on their website, the kindnesspandemic.org, or you can follow along on their Facebook page or Twitter. So jump on board. Dr. Barrett is also the director of an anti-ageism organisation called Celebrate Aging. Again, I will put the links to both of those organisations down below. I know that you're really going to enjoy her podcast. She's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Catherine Barrett. And also, just remember that you can listen to this as well. The Good Girl Confessional is available in all the normal places: Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts. Thank you so much for joining us. In these really bizarre and unusual times, please stay safe. Please social distance. Please stay at home when you can, and be kind. Hello and welcome, Dr. Catherine Barrett, to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. I am so delighted to have you on the podcast today because I'm so excited to talk about your brand new project, which is the Kindness Pandemic, and amongst your other incredible work, which we'll get to. So welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation, because the Good Girl podcast sounds like an amazing project. So well done you on this work.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's really nice to give, we were just chatting quickly before, but it is really nice to give a platform to the incredible women in the world who are doing such amazing things and whose voices generally are sort of like dulled down or they're not heard. And It's absolutely my passion project.
Yeah, fantastic. Well done.
Well, well done to you, because clearly we are living through unprecedented times. We are living in a world of COVID-19, coronavirus, and the world obviously has never seen anything quite like this, before. So tell us about the Kindness Pandemic and where the idea came from and what got you motivated.
Okay, so the kindness pandemic is 2 weeks old today, 7 o'clock tonight, and it now has over 500,000 group members, and there are over 2.5 million posts and comments, and it's growing at a rate of knots. But I set it up 2 weeks ago in response to a number of things. The first one was lots of stories on social media, people being very frightened about coronavirus, and there's no doubt that this is scary stuff. But also to the stories on social media of a small number of people behaving badly, so panic buying, aggression in supermarkets, all that kind of stuff. And a number of people said to me things like, why can't we focus on kindness? If we're not being kind, we're not going to get through this. And some people were responding and saying, this could be a turning point. This could be a way, that the world changes and we come back to ourselves and we create a better world out of this. And I was listening and I was thinking, well, I agree actually, but what I think is that cultures aren't accidental, cultures are created. And nothing's going to change unless we get off our backsides and make it change. And so what I decided to do, particularly after my friend Maren posted that she'd been in her local supermarket and the staff, the checkout chick actually, had bruises and scratches up her arm. And Maren said to her, what happened? And she said she'd been attacked by shoppers and that a number of staff in the supermarket had.
Oh my
And
God.
I just thought, we're better than that. We can do better than that. And if people in supermarkets don't go to work, we're not going to get the supplies that we need. Like, we need each other now more than ever. So I set up Kindness Pandemic and just said to people, please share an act of kindness. And the next morning I got up and there were 1,000 people. And now it's growing enormously. What we did in the first couple of days, we decided we wanted to focus particularly on random acts of kindness in supermarkets. And, there were some really beautiful actions. They were the days where people were still going into supermarkets. So we made up some signs that people could print and take in there. And it was the sort of signs that were things like, thank you to all the staff in these supermarkets for coming to work to help make sure that we've got the supplies that we need. One of the other ones was, please be, it was a call out to shoppers. Please be kind to the staff in this supermarket. They're just doing their jobs. So those kinds of things. And then people got on board and beautiful organic actions happened out of that. Like one of my favourite stories early on, because it's so beautiful and simple, is someone said they bought a caramel twirl, which is, a chocolate for $2.50, bought it at the supermarket and then handed it to the checkout check and said, this is for you, thank you for coming to work. And she burst into tears and said, it's been so hard, because I think, with the downturn in the economy, everybody's worried about their jobs. And I'm sure a lot of people who work in supermarkets would rather be at home, making sure they're safe, looking after their families, but they're going to work, some of them, I suspect, because they need that work, and they're exposing themselves to coronavirus, and so at the very least we can be kind to them. And in response to that, we actually got contacted by Woolworths, which was really lovely, and they gave us a little bit of support for the campaign. But what that meant was that it took off in a new way. They helped us with some media releases and tried to help us get the message out there about supermarkets. And if you go through the page, beautiful acts, and people saying, I did this in my local supermarket, and the supermarket staff are crying in the bread aisle, and all these beautiful things. So these simple acts can have an enormous impact. And we're saying to people now, as we did then, if you can't, and we're asking people to stay home in Melbourne at the moment, you can still send an email or make a phone call and just let people know that you appreciate them. So the momentum from that campaign just said to us, we're really on to something here. And so our next campaign was for health care workers. And so we have a healthcare hero award. And it's an award that people can download and then share on their social media and tag one of their family or friends that's a healthcare worker. We don't want people going into healthcare services to hand over these or email them to healthcare services. We don't want people making contact with healthcare services unless they need to for other reasons. So the idea is all of us have friends and family that are healthcare workers. Tag them on social media and say, I thank you for what you do. Or you can actually send this to people through their phone as well too. And it's been really lovely for me on my personal social media to see, one of them's really bright yellow, and to see it just, my Facebook feed light up in bright yellow and think that, it's just one really small thing, but it makes an enormous difference. So, those two campaigns made a difference, and people were just sharing amazing, a lot of toilet roll stories, because there were really significant issues around toilet paper.
And sadly, still in Victoria, there still is, and I think globally there still is.
There still is, yeah. So one of the things that started to happen for us was we started to talk about what kindness was. And early on, there were some people who got on our page and said, messages of doom and gloom, and said, what good is kindness? How's kindness going to help? You people you're all delusional. Kindness is not, it's not enough. And in response, I got on and said to people, kindness as an emotion, a feeling, is not enough. We want action. We don't want you to just feel kind. We want you to do something for somebody else. We want acts of kindness. So at about that point, people were getting in the group, and they were sharing pictures of puppies and memes about kindness and pictures of the gardens. And we just said, we're going to have to stop this actually, because we want to keep this group really focused on trying to change the lives of people who are affected by coronavirus. And so now we've gone to, posts have to be approved, because it's really important for us to be on track. So what we noticed around then too was that 3 different impacts or kinds of kindness emerged. And the first one was really obvious, that people understood that an act of kindness could potentially transform the lives of the person who was receiving that act of kindness. And certainly there are lots of posts about people who have received acts of kindness and are just moved to tears by what they've experienced, and that's wonderful. But one evening I did a post for people, and I said, tell me what it feels like for you to do an act of kindness for someone else. And the responses were really beautiful. People said things like, I feel like I'm part of a greater humanity. I feel like there's no us and them, there's just us. I feel like I can do this. I feel like I'm connected. I feel like I've got a sense of greater purpose. And people talked about hope, that they felt like, that there was something that they could do. And so, that's incredibly important. And we want people to really understand kindness, because it helps people to want to be involved. And what we're saying to people is that acts of kindness won't make coronavirus go away, but they might transform your experience of it. So they're the first 2. And then the third one is, we didn't realise, or certainly I didn't realise, that in fact the group is an act of kindness in itself. That so many people have given us beautiful feedback about the group and said things like, somebody shared the other day, my mental well-being was going down the toilet until I found this page. You've helped save my mental well-being. Thank you. Somebody else told us the story of going to work each day and really struggling going to work, but goes to work, parks in the car park, and then scrolls through the page just to read about acts of kindness, to feel like there are good people in the world. It's going to be okay. I can go to work now. And so, the page itself, somebody got on the other day and said, my psychologist recommended that I have a look at this page. So the page itself is that posting on the page is another act of kindness, because by sharing what you're doing, you're encouraging other people. So that's kind of where we got to. And then it just grew and grew and grew. And what we realised was that this was a thing, that could make a difference to people's lives, that this was something that didn't just make people feel good, it could really have a really positive impact and help people get through coronavirus. So what we did a couple of days ago is we set up Kindness Pandemic Local. And that's a call for people all around the world to set up their own local kindness pandemic groups. And so far, we've been inundated with people setting up groups all around the world. And this is where the revolution steps up a notch, because if people can support each other in their local suburbs, what they can do is share acts of kindness. They can also do a call out, so-and-so needs whatever, but they can also go give information from local health authorities. They can also share information about local government guidelines. So taking the kindness pandemic, which is a global movement now, taking it down to local means it really becomes embedded and effective. So that's what we're doing. And we've set up guidelines for people that they can copy and paste and download to their pages. And we're saying be really mindful about the rules you set for your group, because people want to, we do it on Facebook all the time, people do puppies and memes and they're beautiful, but we want action.
Yeah.
So that's what we've done in the last 2 weeks.
It's absolutely incredible. And I will say that the reason that I invited you on here is because obviously I'm a fan of the Facebook page. I think it's an extraordinary thing that you've created. but every day for me, because, you know, I am one of those people that I read widely anyway. And so this sort of thing happens, and I found myself falling down rabbit holes of constantly following news streams and what's happening and how this is affecting the world and how many people have got it and how many people are we losing. And so that sort of, for me, when I came across the Facebook page, and a friend had told me about it. So when I got onto it every single day, that's where I go if I want to feel better. And it's really encouraged me to go out and do things for other people. And I know that it is encouraging people, really, as you said, it's really about action, but it's simple things as well. You know, like some of the posts that I've seen have been extraordinary. And obviously, as you said, it is global. So what I'm loving about the Facebook page is when I see people say, oh, I'm here in the UK or I'm here in the US. And so I went and I did this for my neighbour. And I think, you know, that's so beautiful that it makes me smile every day.
Yeah. 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 Well, you know, I mean, that's a lovely thing because, you know, we are in a really difficult situation.
Yeah, we are.
And yeah, so we're now, you know, a team of maybe 50 or 60 volunteers. And one of the things that we are now doing is moving to focused campaigns. So we're saying to people, so we've had 2 weeks of, you know, 2.5 million posts and comments. And we're saying now we want to create something that's really innovative in terms of the ideas and campaigns around kindness. And the type of kindness that we're talking about on this page is intersectional kindness. So it's kindness for people who are marginalised or disempowered and people who are on the front lines. So what we've now moved to is a new campaign every 4 days. So this morning we launched a campaign called Love Stories. And this is a campaign that invites young people to write a story, tell us a story about an older person they love and tell us why they love the older person. And then the older person responds. It can all be done electronically, so we're not asking people to have physical contact. And the reason that we have this campaign is because this is a disease that affects everybody, but it has a particular impact on older people. So older people are more likely to get the disease, and the rates of mortality are higher. And a lot of older people are really very frightened, and some of them are very isolated. So what we want to do is have a campaign that focuses on connecting older people in, but also too with schools shutting down. There are a lot of people who have children at home who want to be engaged. So we think for the next 4 days to light up the group with posts about, you know, here's the beautiful message my child or young person sent to an older person they love, I think will be really quite beautiful. And then there will be the next campaign and the next and the next. And people are saying to us, we must do things for teachers, and we must do something for, you know, a whole range of people. But, you know, one of the things people are saying to us is, what about women who are in situations of family violence? And now they have their partner at home and they're shut down and they're locked in. Maybe their partner's lost work. Maybe there's more frustration. You know, so we're trying to talk to family violence services about how we can support women who are in those situations. And we're having to be really creative about, and it may just be that we're asking people, you know, if you've got female friends who are at home, you know, just reach out and say hello and check in. And, you know, it could be as simple as that. But we with all of our campaigns, we're trying to check in with the experts and say, do you have any ideas? How can we help? This is what we're thinking of doing. What do you think? So with our health practitioner campaign, you know, we put a proposal to a group of health practitioners, including some medical people and some nurses, and they said to us, love it, but you need to delete these parts of the campaign and focus in on a particular aspect. So that's what we did, and that's what we'll do with all our campaigns.
Which is fantastic. And I think that's one of the things that I'm extraordinarily impressed with, is that you have gone out to those industries directly and spoken to those people to sort of say, well, what is it that's going to work for you? What's going to make it real? What's going to, you know, what do you need to see? And I think, you know, there's so much I guess, conflict. People are confused. People are very confused about COVID. They're very confused about what does it mean, but they're also very confused by the messaging they're getting, I guess, from leaders on what they can do, what they can't do, all of those things. So I think it's fantastic that you're going out to experts. And as you say, like being really mindful of the fact that people can't physically connect. So, but how do you bring it? Well, and you, within 2 weeks, as you say, 500,000 people you have brought together. It's an extraordinary thing. I love the campaign at connecting kids with older, beautiful people in their life. I think this is really important. And it kind of is a really nice way for me to sort of talk to you also about the other work that you do, which is around supporting women, ageing women, women as we age in society, and supporting them. Do you want to have a little talk about, because you left academia really to sort of launch yourself into that space. So I'd love you to talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a lot of evidence now that older women experience particular forms of disadvantage. So it's older women are the fastest growing group of homeless. Older women are also, too, the work that I'm doing is particularly around older women who experience sexual assault. And we know that happens in residential aged care because we collect data on it. And in fact, I think 749 reports of sexual assault in residential aged care for the last year, and would expect it to be many thousands more than that. So the residential aged care homes are required to report, but there's not a lot of other requirements. And one of the things is, so my background is nursing and mostly working with older people, then academia. And what happened is I saw sexual assault happen. I challenged it. People tried to shut me down, and that made me more determined. And so then I started delivering education and talking to people about sexual assault, and more people tried to shut me down, and that made me more and more determined. And over the course of the last 15 years, then families and older women started to share their stories with me. And, you know, I think I've become something of a lightning rod for older women's stories about sexual assault. And so, you know, when I was a senior research fellow at La Trobe University. While I was there, I was the chief investigator on Norma's project, which was the first body of evidence on sexual assault of older women in Australia. And not a lot has changed since then, unfortunately. So when I moved across from academia, I created Celebrate Ageing, which is a social enterprise challenging ageism and building respect for older people. That's what I wanted to do. But the other thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to create real change, because some of the research work I did in academia I felt was incredibly important, but it wasn't translating to cultural change. So there was an evidence practice gap, but which I now call an evidence culture gap. And I try to bridge that gap with art and narrative. So I tried traditional approaches to addressing sexual assault, but people don't engage with stories about, or haven't up until recently engaged with stories about sexual assault of older women, and this myth that it's just about what happens in residential aged care. In fact, I think what is more common is older women experience sexual assault or unwanted sexual contact by their intimate partners and other family members. And I don't see family violence services by and large addressing that issue. I don't see sexual assault services, with the exception of some fabulous ones like the Gold Coast Centre Against Sexual Violence and South East CASA in Melbourne. There are not a lot of sexual assault services that are addressing this as well. Unless the message is explicit to older women, unless we tell them, we mean you as well, we're here to help you, older women don't come forward. So that's what I did. So I set up something called the Power Project, which is one of my projects, which is really the transformative power of listening to older women who report sexual assault. Because so often they get told, oh, you must have a urinary tract infection, it's dismissed. And then a couple of years ago, I met Margarita Solis, who was a beautiful 95-year-old woman who was sexually assaulted in a seniors rental service. And she's the first older woman that I know who was prepared to share her story in public. And can we just pause for a moment there to think about what that means? The fact that Margarita is the first woman in Australia who has felt safe enough to share her story publicly.
That's
what does that say about how we're listening?
Yeah, what does it say
and
about how we
Margarita
treat
was shut down.
these incredible women in our society?
Yeah, and Margarita was shut down and silenced in so many ways. So as part of the Power Project, I paid for a filmmaker and a photographer to come to Queensland with me to make a film about Margarita's experience, not the experience of sexual assault as much as the impact it had on her and people's responses. So we made a film, and then Margarita and I, for International Women's Day last year, we launched a campaign called She Too, which was Margarita's strategies for listening to older women. And Margarita was a former army nurse, and if you have a look at She Too, it's really very beautiful. Margarita was 97 then, and she was leading a national campaign to prevent sexual assault of older women. And I think that's so beautiful, but actually also too, I feel a little bit ashamed that it was up to a 97-year-old to do that, because we're not doing enough. So I then set up a project with the Older Women's Network of New South Wales. You know, they're a very dynamic group of people. And we set up a project together where we are now documenting the responses to older women and their families who report sexual assault. And we only have 2 stories up there at the moment, but the campaign is called In Her Shoes. And what we want people to do is to see so a lot of families and older women contact me and say, my mother was sexually assaulted. No one's listening. What can I do? And so I'm providing them with advice and information. I've been doing that for 4 years. And then I try to tell the relevant services, you need to do something about sexual assault. And the change isn't happening.
Yeah.
You know, with the exception of a couple of fabulous organisations like the Australian Association of Gerontology. They're on board, they're doing some work, which is amazing. But we need government leadership on this. And it shouldn't have to come from older women. Older women should not have to fight to be heard. They should be heard. They should be able to access services. So this campaign was saying, I want people to see what I see. So I've had dozens and dozens and dozens of people call me and say, this is what's happened. And I want the government, and I want policymakers, and I want service providers to see what I see. I want to say to them, look at the responses to older women who are sexually assaulted. Look what we're doing. And, you know, the first story, Sandra's story, she was shut down at every single point. I mean, get on and read the stories. They're extraordinary. She had some
share
dementia.
a link with this as well. So I'll put up all the links, by the way, so people can follow along.
So she had some dementia. She reported being raped in a residential aged care home, and a family meeting was called to say, we think your mother's hallucinating, we'll change your medications. And over the course of about 6 to 12 months, she continued to report that she was raped, and every person that came in and saw her tried to change her medication or work out whether she was having a urinary tract infection. Now, the family got a private detective in, a retired detective, who came in and they collected notes from they collected everything. Pathology reports, notes from the residential aged care home, everything. And the detective said, look, I'm really sorry. I really do believe that your mother was raped. But nobody considered that she could have been raped. And so there were no actions, really, no significant actions to address that. And every person the family had contact with failed them, let them down, including the police. I've seen the police report that says, that she had rape fantasies. So that police officer, I think if that was understood by the police in that state, they would be saying, this is not, understatement, this is not best practice, but this is not okay. And so what I need people to do is I need them to understand I need people to see what I see, because I need people to fix it.
Oh,
we need change and no one's listening. And you know what? The solutions are really simple. So I did a campaign to the Royal Commission into Quality and Safety in Aged Care, and it was a submission just on sexual assault. And I gave them narratives from about 40 narratives about, from the research of sexual assault that had taken place. I sent them that submission. The interim report on the Royal Commission into Residential Aged Care did not mention sexual assault. So the Older Women's Network of New South Wales set up a petition to ask the Royal Commission to address this issue, about 12,000 signatures, and I still do not feel confident that this issue is going to be addressed. So I don't know. I think before times of coronavirus, one of the things with the Older Women's Network that we did was we set up a campaign called #WalkWithHer. And the Walk With Her campaign was saying to everybody, please take a photograph of your shoes, post them on social media with the hashtag #WalkWithHer, #OlderWomenCount. We've set up a Facebook page for it. And what we want people, we want to open people's minds and open up conversations. I'm not confident that this is change that will come from governments or policymakers. And so we need the community to get behind this. And the politicians that have, it's really interesting, the politicians that have come on board have been female politicians. Senator Senator Rachel Seward is a Greens senator from WA, and she hosted a round table at Parliament House in Canberra, bringing people together at fairly short notice to say, what can we do? Now, we all owe her a debt of gratitude for taking a stand. Senator Helen Polly from Tasmania, a Labor senator from Tasmania, then took a stand and has been tweeting and posting and saying, and sent us a picture of her shoes. Jed Carney is an MP in Melbourne, has also taken the stand. But these are women standing up for women. Most politicians are male. We need them to take a stand as well too.
Yeah, we do.
And we need to say to each and every one of us, to all the women who are listening, there are so many things that get better with age. We can be, for me, I'm going to turn 60 this year. I know who I am, I know what I want, and I'm going out to get it in ways that I didn't when I was 20 or 30 or 40. My body's not the same as it was. I'm adjusting to some of those changes. I love my grey hair, but there's a sense of authenticity and realness to me now that I feel so much more liberated than I did in my 20s, 30s and 40s. And my invitation to the women who are listening to this podcast is hold that in your heart in an ageist, sexist world, and don't let anybody tell you that you are less because you are an aging woman.
That is the message of the Good Girl Confessional as well. One of the reasons that I started this podcast was exactly that reason, was giving a voice and a platform for women to use their voices to tell their stories. Because, as we get older, I started blogging under that name when I was, 40. I'm 50 now. It's kind of, as I get older, I start to, I'm actually embracing things about myself. I think, I'm sort of coming into my own. But I do realise that not everyone is possibly, well, clearly not as, I'm an extrovert and I started this podcast or I blogged or I did things, and not every woman feels they can do that or will do that. So I wanted to give a platform for women to share their stories, because women do extraordinary things. And so many of my girlfriends who are 50 and beyond, so women in their 60s who are doing extraordinary things, who are business leaders or who are incredibly active in their communities, they're advocates for things that are going on. And I want their voices to be heard. And that's not to say, too, we have had guests on the show, obviously, who are women who are under 40 because they have gone through extraordinary experiences and things that affect all women. But I think it's really important. I think we do face too much ageism and sexism. And one of my new projects is something called Women Beyond 40. And we, we're on pause at the moment because of coronavirus, trying to figure out what it's going to look like now. But basically by September, we hope to launch a magazine, which was to be in print and digital. It may end up just digital now with the way things are going, but was exactly that. So a magazine written by women for women over 40 and beyond, and being able to interview women who, who are over 40, whose voices aren't getting heard, but they're doing these extraordinary things. And quite often women, much like, yourself, you are a leader in this fight for protecting older women against sexual assault. And as you say, it's that you're not being taken well, I can't say you're not being taken seriously, you are by women, but the men are not getting on board in terms of politicians, change makers, those that have the power to actually make things happen. And that's happening in so many fields. And yet I see so many women are just extraordinary leaders because women tend to just get shit done. And I think, looking at you now, going back to even like the kindness pandemic, it is so mind-blowing to me that you only started that 2 weeks ago. It feels like a huge warm hug in my life every day when I go to it. But the fact that you just went, I have to do something, and you just did it. And the impact of that is so extraordinary.
Well, I think your words are, your words are they resonate and they're incredibly important. I think, something that resonates with me particularly is you're talking about being an extrovert. And I think of myself as an introvert who works as an extrovert. So I'm a fairly quiet person, but I'll take a stand for social justice. And so as an introvert, that's exhausting. But I do it because I have a voice and I'm using my voice for other people. And there are so many women who see the injustices. And if we all take a stand, there will be a revolution for good. And I don't, we shouldn't have to. It should be everybody. But there are so many women who are motivated and who just get it because we're on the receiving end of marginalisation or oppression. And, I encourage everybody to take a stand for whatever you believe in. And, because you can make a difference. We can all make a difference. Look at me. This is one person who then brought in some friends and then more friends and more friends and more friends and more friends. And, I think we're going to hit 600,000 by the end of the day. So, we can do anything.
It's mind-blowing and brilliantly mind-blowing. But, I think some of my, favourite stories coming out of your phenomenal, Facebook group is things like, people dropping things off, as you say, like to their elderly neighbours and leaving it on the doorstep. I think I read one the other day that she said to her neighbour, that she said we couldn't get close, obviously. So she said to her, what is it you need? What's something else I can do for you? And she said the one thing she wanted she couldn't give her, which was a hug. And so she said, which almost broke my heart. But then she said, so the next day I took my dogs. There, and I basically let her have the dogs for a cuddle because she couldn't hug her. I think so those sort of acts of kindness don't always have to involve money. They don't have to involve, food or products or things or whatever. They can be just, as you say, ringing up your elderly neighbour and saying, hey, how are you doing? Because people are isolated, or ringing your girlfriends and going, hey, how are you guys all coping? And checking in with people who, might be more marginalised. And I have a lot of friends in the disability community. I think it's really important to just be aware that a lot of people whose immune systems are generally more compromised anyway are so terrified at this point in time. It's not an easy thing for them to get out to a supermarket, and when they do, they're frightened, which is understandable. So I think it's just being really aware of everyone around us, all the things that we just don't think about, we take for granted. The one thing that you have done through this is that kindness does matter. It absolutely matters. And acts of kindness can, as you say, change someone's day, but it may just change someone's life, and it may save someone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
absolutely, and I suspect that it has already.
Oh, yeah, I agree. When I read some of the stories on there, I've been brought to tears. It's made me laugh. It's made me smile. It's made me cry happy tears. But I do think that you can actually feel there's so much emotion in these stories. And I do think, and as we know, sadly, psychologically, we don't know the full impacts yet of what this will do to people, the isolation, the social distancing. It's possible we may go through a lockdown, and it's that interesting thing of how psychologically people will be impacted. And I think showing kindness, doing acts of kindness can really save a life. Checking in with someone can really save a life. These are not just, hashtag moments. This is for real.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I, for one, am extraordinarily grateful to you that you just thought of it and decided to do it, and you have started a movement of kindness. And I'm just so, so grateful to you and to all of your gorgeous friends who, as you say, your 50 or so volunteers who are in there every day and monitoring that and really checking all those posts and making sure everyone is safe and really sticking to what the view is. And it's an extraordinary thing that you've done. And in creating that, as you say, that is an extraordinary act of kindness that you've given to the rest of us as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. I'll pass that back to the team. They'll love that. They'll absolutely love that. But, I think it shows the power of one group of people to make a difference. And we can all make a difference. So
yeah, we really can.
Let's do it.
We really can. And I think it's just, what's really nice about, there's nothing nice obviously about coronavirus, but what I hope, as you hope, will come out of this is that people are more aware of their neighbours. They are actually more aware of their communities. They're more aware of that person who owns that cafe that's going to close. Or, I've had friends who are salon owners and they've closed. I've got a niece and a nephew working in supermarkets who are on the forefront, as you say, getting abuse and whatever. I've got friends, as you say, that are in the medical industry and, a couple of nurses, and as you say, just those really being aware that the people we are most relying on right now are the people that are often not paid what they're worth. They are, they're not valued as much as they should be. And especially things like supermarket workers, delivery people, people are getting things home delivered. There's all those delivery people are out there on the front line as well.
Yeah.
And they're not paid particularly well, but they're really so important right now for us to have any sense of well-being in life and normality, I guess, whatever normality looks like now. And I'm just so grateful to yourself that you've created an environment where people are so much more aware.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm grateful to you as well too for looking at the experiences of women and ageing. It's an incredibly important work that you're doing, and we could probably count on two hands people that are focusing on that. So well done.
Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Because, as I'm sure you know too, when I first started it, and especially when I started to look at WB40, Women Beyond 40, I'm sure there was a number of people who were just sort of looking at me like, why? And I actually did get asked that question, why are you focusing just on women and why beyond 40? And then I feel like, as you say, sometimes it feels like you're actually talking into an empty room, but I have to keep getting that message across, because women over 40 and beyond, whether they're 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 or 90, are extraordinarily valuable in our society. And their stories are so important. And in some cultures, elderly women are seen to be so wise and brilliant, and they're the bringers of knowledge. And yet in Western society especially, we see such a void in that. we become almost invisible. Our stories are not worth listening to, apparently. So for me, I don't think I've come across a woman over 40 yet when I talk about this project where they have said that won't work. But it's interesting, women.
Yeah, people love it. Yeah, women love it.
They love it because they're excited that anybody wants to actually listen to them and wants them to be heard. So I'm sure, I'm in awe of you, believe me. So I'm sure that as time goes down the track, we'll be talking more and more often, I hope.
Well, you're welcome to, I'm happy to talk again, absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. So I guess if you've got a message for everybody out there, obviously everyone should get on board and join Kindness Pandemic, because that's the best kind of pandemic in the world is kindness. But if you had one message to shout out to anyone who's listening about why kindness is so important, or acts of kindness are important, what would that be?
Well, my message about acts of kindness is set up a local kindness pandemic group. That's the most powerful, after heeding government warnings and all the other things we need to do. It's a really powerful thing to do, because you're connecting your community in and giving people a positive focus and practical help. And if you can't do it yourself, call some people, give them a nudge and get them to set it up. There's a whole page on our website, thekindnesspandemic.org. There's a whole page of information and instructions to help you set up your own. And then we're asking people to register their local version with our team, so that we can keep a register of a network, a global network. So that's the action that's required now. And I think the other thing too, particularly for the women who are listening, if you've got female friends who are now homebound, send them a message, check in. You will have friends who are experiencing family violence. They may not want to tell you, but just checking in and saying, are you okay? Just give people that lifeline. It's a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah. Are you okay? And do you need anything? Because I think it's a really, are you okay? I think tends to, especially as you say, it's so important. If women are facing real issues, sometimes they won't talk about it. So they may very well say, oh, I'm fine. But if you actually say, do you need anything? For anything I can do for you? I think sometimes they tend to, you'll get hints of things that they might need, or that they are going through.
Yeah.
So that's so true, Catherine. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Actually, I think that there is it is a concern for a lot of women out there who find themselves in those situations, and more so now that feeling of I can't leave because of what's going on is really difficult. So yeah. Mm-hmm. I think you are one of the kindest people I may have ever met. I think I'm so glad that you started.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. Thank you.
It's really beautiful. So thank you for your extraordinary gift to the world, because I feel like, as you said, you've started a movement now, and I think that your kindness community, if I can call it that, is actually spreading faster than the coronavirus. And I think that says everything, right?
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful. So thank you.
So I'm very grateful. Thank you so much for your time, because I know you must be crazy busy at the moment.
No worries. I hope that...
Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen to your quality podcasts. We chat to really interesting women telling their amazing stories. But it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for all of your support. Bye for now.